The night air was heavy with silence, broken only by the growl of an engine cutting through the empty highway. Max whimpered softly in the back seat, his tail tucked tightly beneath him, sensing something was terribly wrong. David gripped the wheel, his jaw clenched, his eyes reflecting a cold resolve that Max had never seen before. Sarah sat beside him, her arms crossed, staring out the window with a distant indifference that made Max's chest ache with confusion. Max thought of the warm nights spent curled at David's feet, the long walks where Sarah would laugh as he chased the falling leaves, and his heart surged with a desperate hope that none of this was real. David muttered under his breath, "We can't keep him anymore." Sarah sighed, not even glancing back, her silence sharper than words. The car slowed, headlights casting harsh beams over the deserted road. David pulled over, his hand firm as he grabbed Max by the scruff, dragging him toward the cold asphalt. Max yelped, his nails scraping against the doorframe, his pleading eyes locked on Sarah, who turned her face away. The slam of the door echoed like thunder, the car sped off, and the taillights faded into the horizon, leaving Max trembling, abandoned and alone in the night. Max stood frozen, paws trembling on the cracked asphalt, the night pressing in like a suffocating blanket. The chill cut through his fur, but the deeper cold was in his chest, where the sound of the car's departure echoed endlessly. His mind clung to images of David tossing him a ball, of Sarah laughing as he leapt for it, of the gentle pats he once believed meant forever. But forever had turned to nothing. He lifted his head, ears straining, hoping the car would return, that this was some cruel mistake. Yet only silence answered, and the stars above seemed distant and indifferent. A lone howl escaped his throat, raw and broken, carrying across the highway like a plea no one would ever hear. Fear crept closer now, the realization that no footsteps or hands would guide him. He was alone, truly abandoned. His heart thudded heavy, each beat an anchor pulling him into despair. Max whimpered, his scarred ear twitching in the cold wind, and he lay down on the rough asphalt, his eyes locked on the endless horizon, where his family had vanished forever. The wind carried the faint scent of oil and burnt rubber, harsh reminders of the world Max had been cast into. He lifted his head, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, searching for movement, for life, for anything to replace the silence. But the only companions were the shadows stretching across the desolate road, shifting as the fog thickened. His ears perked at the distant hum of another car, his body trembling with desperate hope, but the vehicle sped by without slowing, headlights flashing past like ghosts ignoring his existence. Max whimpered, tail curled tighter beneath him. His stomach growled with a low ache, echoing his loneliness. He pawed at the ground, scraping gravel, as if digging for comfort he knew wasn't there. The betrayal burned in his chest like fire, yet his heart refused to let go of the faintest hope that someone, somewhere, might still care. Max staggered to his paws, the rough gravel biting into his pads as he stumbled off the road. His legs wavered under the weight of hunger and fear. He scanned the barren stretch of land beside the highway, fields stretching into darkness with no sign of shelter. The silence was brutal, broken only by his shallow breaths. His ears twitched at every rustle in the grass, each sound a possible threat. He remembered Sarah's voice, once soft and gentle, now a fading ghost in his memory, and he pressed forward, as if moving could erase the pain. His scarred ear flicked as wind whipped through the fields, carrying no comfort. Max paused, turning back once toward the road, eyes fixed on the horizon where the car had vanished. A whine slipped from his throat before he turned away, stepping into the unknown, the weight of abandonment pressing with every step. The night deepened, stars veiled by drifting clouds, as Max wandered aimlessly across the barren field. Each step sank into the damp soil, leaving fragile prints that told the story of loss. His breaths came heavy, a soft fog rising in the cold air. He paused near a cluster of rocks, curling into himself, body shivering with exhaustion. Memories crashed against him. Sarah's hand brushing his fur, David's voice calling his name, the scent of home that no longer existed. He licked his scarred ear, a gesture of comfort that offered none. The silence pressed close, so absolute it felt like another betrayal. His heart pounded, each beat a reminder that he was still alive, though he wondered why. As sleep tugged at his weary body, Max curled tighter, tail wrapping close, eyes dimming but never closing, too afraid of what the darkness might hold. The morning sun broke timidly through gray clouds, painting the wet field in pale light. Max lifted his weary head, his fur damp from dew, and his eyes heavy with sleepless fear. He stood slowly, every muscle aching, and looked around for signs of life. His nose twitched, catching the faint scent of smoke and bread from somewhere far beyond the field. He followed it instinctively, each step dragging yet driven by desperate hunger. Memories burned in his chest, Sarah's voice calling him in from the yard, David tossing scraps under the table, a warmth he thought eternal. Now, only silence echoed. His ears twitched at the chirping of birds overhead, yet he felt no comfort, only the ache of loneliness. He stumbled forward, paws sinking into soft mud, his scarred ear flicking as the breeze carried scents of humans. Max's heart raced. Perhaps, just perhaps, someone might see him not as a burden, but as a soul yearning for care. Max pressed onward, paws caked in mud, guided by the drifting scent of bread. The world felt strange now. Every sound a reminder of how vulnerable he was, without David's commands or Sarah's footsteps behind him. A crow cawed overhead, its shadow sweeping across his path. He stopped, ears perking, eyes scanning the horizon. A faint trail of smoke curled skyward, a promise of human presence. His heart pounded, torn between fear and longing. He remembered David's harsh grip, Sarah's averted gaze, and trembled. Yet hunger pushed him. His belly growled, louder than his doubts. He moved cautiously, head low, tail tucked, each step driven by a fragile hope. Somewhere deep inside, he still believed not all humans would turn away. His paws ached, his breaths quickened, but he did not stop. For the first time since the car door slammed shut, Max felt something faint, a reason to keep walking. As Max neared the edge of the field, a gravel road appeared, winding toward a small farmhouse. His steps slowed, his body trembling with doubt. The last humans he had trusted had abandoned him, and now another chance stood ahead. His eyes darted nervously, ears flicking at every creak of the world. A chicken scurried across the road, startling him, and he let out a low whimper. He remembered Sarah smiling once as she fed birds near their old home. The memory was a knife, sharp with longing. Yet his hunger gnawed harder. He stepped onto the gravel, stones pressing against his pads, his body low to the ground, as though expecting rejection. The farmhouse seemed both salvation and threat. He paused, scarred ear twitching, and let out a soft whine, a question to the air. Would this place hold cruelty or kindness? The gravel crunched beneath Max's paws as he inched closer. A figure appeared near the farmhouse porch, a woman hanging laundry, her motions steady and calm. Max froze, heart pounding. She was not Sarah, not the woman who had once turned away, but a stranger with kind eyes that seemed to catch the morning sun. His body quivered between instinct and memory, torn between fleeing and stepping closer. The scent of bread grew stronger, pulling him like a tether. He lowered himself further, tail tucked tight, ears back, his whimper soft as a plea. The woman turned, noticing him, her expression shifting from surprise to sympathy. Max's heart leapt, then sank, fearing the harsh rejection he had learned too well. But she didn't shout or scowl. She simply watched, her eyes gentle, her body still. For the first time, Max felt a fragile thread of hope stir within his chest. Emily set the laundry basket down, her gaze locked on the trembling dog at the road's edge. She took a cautious step forward, her voice gentle, though Max could not understand the words. He whined, backing a step, then pausing, caught between fear and hunger. The scent of fresh bread from her window curled around him, pulling him closer. Emily knelt, her hand outstretched but not demanding, her eyes soft with patience. Max's heart raced, his body taut as a bowstring, ready to flee, yet desperate for kindness. He edged forward, ears flat, steps faltering, tail pressed tight to his legs. Emily whispered softly again, her tone a balm. The distance shrank inch by inch until Max stood trembling a few feet away. His eyes locked on hers, and for the first time since the highway, he felt not forgotten, but seen. His whimper turned to silence, his breath shaky, his heart daring to hope. Emily's soft words lingered in the air, but Max trembled, his paws digging into the gravel as his instinct screamed caution. Hunger battled fear in his chest, his ribs visible beneath his worn fur. Emily whispered, "It's all right, boy, you're safe." Her voice was calm, but Max's memory replayed David's sharp tone, the slam of the car door, the betrayal etched into his soul. He lowered his head, tail pressed tight, ears flat, ready to bolt. Yet Emily did not move closer, her patience steady, her body low to the ground, as if to make herself small. A breeze carried the smell of warm bread stronger now, curling into Max's nose like a lifeline. His stomach growled painfully, forcing him forward one trembling step. Emily's hand remained outstretched, but she kept her distance, her eyes soft and unwavering. Max paused, frozen between terror and longing, as the silence wrapped around them. A sudden shout shattered the fragile moment. From the farmhouse porch, Mark stepped out, his boots striking the wood with sharp finality. His voice carried harshness, "Emily, don't touch that stray." Max flinched, stumbling back, his eyes wide with panic. His heart raced as he remembered David's coldness, the weight of rejection. Emily turned, frowning, her voice softer but firm. "He is scared, Mark. He needs help." Mark shook his head, his face stern, arms crossed with authority. Max whimpered, torn between running and staying, his body pressed low to the ground. The contrast of Emily's compassion and Mark's resistance pressed heavy in the air. The faint warmth Max had felt began to tremble beneath the shadow of fear. Emily's eyes softened again as she looked back at Max, whispering, "It's okay, don't be afraid." But Mark's presence loomed, a reminder that kindness was never guaranteed. Max's chest heaved as he backed away, the gravel biting into his paws. His scarred ear twitched at Mark's tone, his body trembling with fear. Emily took a slow step forward, her hand still low, her eyes pleading not only with Max but with Mark. "He's just hungry," she said, her voice carrying quiet urgency. Mark shook his head, his voice sharp. "Strays bring trouble, don't get attached." Max whimpered, pressing his belly close to the ground, ears pinned. His stomach twisted with hunger, but the weight of rejection was heavier. Emily crouched further, her body open, her hands steady. She whispered again, "You're not trouble, you're just lost." The wind tugged at her hair, her patience unwavering. Max lifted his gaze, eyes locking on hers, torn between bolting and daring to hope that someone might see him differently. The silence stretched, broken only by Max's labored breaths and the distant rustle of leaves. Emily reached into her apron, pulling out a piece of bread. She placed it gently on the gravel between them, her hands retreating slowly. "This is for you," she whispered, her tone a lullaby. Max's nose twitched, his body trembling as he inched closer. Pause tentative. Mark scoffed, turning away with a shake of his head, muttering, "You'll regret this." But Emily's gaze remained fixed on Max, her patience unshaken. Step by step, Max approached, lowering his head toward the bread. His body quivered, ears pinned, tail tucked, but hunger overpowered fear. He sniffed the bread, hesitated, then finally took it, chewing quickly with desperate hunger. Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile, her heart swelling with relief. For the first time, Max accepted something without being pushed away. Max licked the last crumbs from the gravel, his eyes darting nervously between Emily and Mark. His heart pounded with uncertainty, but the bread in his belly brought a fleeting comfort he hadn't felt in days. Emily whispered, "Good boy," her voice carrying warmth that wrapped around his fear like a fragile blanket. Max lifted his head slowly, ears twitching, tail still pressed tight, but no longer shaking as fiercely. Mark remained near the porch, his frown heavy, But his attention waned as he turned back inside, muttering under his breath. The tension eased slightly, the silence no longer suffocating but filled with unspoken possibility. Emily stayed kneeling, her hands resting softly on her lap, her gaze never leaving Max. For the first time since his abandonment, Max felt a faint spark that the world might still hold a place for him. His heart dared to hope, though the scars whispered caution. The morning haze drifted across the farmhouse yard, and Max lingered near the gravel, torn between retreat and trust. Emily carried a small bowl of water, her steps slow, her movements calm. She set it down gently, whispering, "Here, boy, you must be thirsty." Max's body trembled, yet his nose twitched at the scent of fresh water. His stomach churned, but his throat burned more fiercely. He glanced toward the porch, half expecting Mark's harsh tone, but the door remained closed. Emily crouched, keeping her eyes level with Max, her voice soft and steady. "You've been through so much, haven't you?" His scarred ear flicked at her words, the kindness unfamiliar, almost painful in its tenderness. He stepped forward cautiously, his paws dragging against the gravel, and lapped at the water. Each drop seemed to revive a piece of his broken spirit. Emily's smile widened, her eyes glistening, as if she saw not a stray, but a soul in need. Later that afternoon, as shadows stretched across the yard, Emily sat on the porch with an old wooden box on her lap. Inside were collars, leashes, and worn photos. She sighed, brushing her fingers over a picture of a golden retriever, eyes bright with loyalty. Her voice cracked. "I lost him last year. He was everything." Max, resting cautiously nearby, lifted his head at her tone, his ears twitching. She smiled faintly, eyes meeting his. "You remind me of him, though you've known only pain." The wind stirred the photo, and Max tilted his head, sensing her sorrow. Emily's eyes softened further, her voice carrying both ache and wonder. "Maybe you're here for a reason." Her hand rested on the box, the weight of memory heavy, yet her gaze on Max was filled with fragile hope. For her, this stray was no accident, but perhaps the answer to grief she still carried. Mark stepped out again, his face hard, voice sharp. "Emily, you can't replace him with some stray." His words cut through the fragile calm. Max flinched, his body low, tail tucked, eyes darting. Emily's voice steadied, though her hands trembled. "I'm not replacing anyone, Mark. I'm saving him." Mark shook his head, anger flaring in his tone. "Strays don't change. They bite, they fight, they don't belong." Max whimpered softly, the words echoing David's cold dismissal. Yet, Emily's eyes did not waver as she looked at Max. "He's already survived more than most, Mark. That means he belongs." Silence stretched between them, heavy with conflict. Mark turned away with a mutter, but Emily reached her hand down again, her expression firm. For Max, her gaze became a beacon, not rejection but defiance against the cruelty he had known before. That evening Emily sat by the barn, Max beside her, both framed in twilight. She whispered, "I found you here for a reason. You've been trained, haven't you?" Max tilted his head, eyes sharp, body alert. She tossed a small stick gently across the ground. To her surprise, Max hesitated only briefly before fetching it, dropping it near her feet. Her heart leapt, eyes wide with realization. "You were someone's partner," she murmured. Max's scarred ear flicked as memories flashed, David shouting commands, long walks, the pride of being wanted. But those days had ended in betrayal. Emily stroked the stick with trembling fingers, whispering, "You still remember, don't you?" Max lowered himself beside her, eyes soft, body calmer than before. In that moment, Emily saw not just a stray, but a dog with a past, a purpose buried beneath pain, waiting to resurface. The stars emerged, painting the night sky as Emily leaned against the barn wall. Max lay close, his body tense yet drawn to her warmth. Emily whispered, "You weren't just abandoned. Someone once trusted you and then betrayed that trust." Max lifted his head, ears twitching, eyes glistening with something deeper than fear. Emily's hand brushed the air near him, not touching, but close. But here, you don't have to be afraid anymore, she murmured. Mark's shadow lingered in the farmhouse window, his frown visible even in the dim glow, but Emily did not falter. She whispered again, "You're safe now. Whatever they took from you will rebuild together." Max exhaled, his body easing slightly, his eyes fixed on her. For the first time since that terrible night, he allowed himself to believe. Maybe betrayal did not mean the end, but the beginning of something new. The storm rolled in that night, thunder rumbling across the fields as rain lashed against the farmhouse windows. Max cowered near the barn, his body trembling at each crack of thunder. His mind burned with memories of the highway, the slam of the door, the roar of the car. Emily rushed out into the storm, her coat clinging to her, her voice sharp with urgency. "Max, come here, it's all right." She called again, her eyes scanning the yard. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the figure of Mark striding toward the barn, his face hard. "This is what I warned you about, Emily," he shouted above the storm. Max whimpered, his scarred ear twitching, torn between bolting into the night and staying with the only person who had shown him kindness. The storm raged, and with it, his heart pounded with fear and doubt. Emily dropped to her knees in the mud, rain plastering her hair to her face. Her voice cut through the storm, softer now, but steady. "Max, don't run, please. Stay." Max's paws shifted nervously, his body crouched, eyes darting between her and Mark. Mark's voice thundered louder than the storm. "He's a stray, Emily. Dangerous, unpredictable." Max whimpered, his ribs heaving, the weight of David's rejection pressing hard. Emily shook her head, her gaze locked, only on Max. "You're not dangerous. You're scared. You're brave." Her words wrapped around him, tender and defiant. For a moment, time slowed, the storm fading into silence in his ears. Max lowered his body, torn between the instinct to flee and the fragile thread of trust holding him in place. Emily's trembling hand reached out once more, steady despite the storm. Suddenly, a distant cry pierced the storm, a child's scream from the farmhouse. Emily turned sharply, her face pale with fear. "Lily!" she shouted, her voice cracking. Mark froze, spinning toward the house. Through the window, faint light flickered, smoke curling into the night. Without hesitation, Emily sprinted toward the farmhouse. Max lifted his head, ears pricked, eyes wide. His body trembled, torn between panic and instinct. Another cry echoed, desperate and sharp, and something deep within Max surged. His fear cracked, replaced by something older, something trained into him long ago. His paws dug into the mud, muscles taut. He remembered fetching, guarding, protecting, not just surviving. With a powerful lunge, Max raced toward the farmhouse, water spraying around him as thunder roared above. The night had demanded his choice, and he made it, to protect. Inside the farmhouse, smoke billowed from the kitchen, flames licking the curtains. Lily, a small girl, clung to the railing of the stairs, her eyes wide with terror. Emily rushed inside, coughing, calling, "Lily, hold on!" But the fire spread fast, heat forcing her back. Mark grabbed a wet cloth, trying to push forward, but the smoke was too thick. Max burst through the doorway, his body low, eyes sharp, every nerve alive with instinct. Emily gasped, her voice breaking, "Max, no!" But Max darted forward, weaving through the smoke, his paws slipping on the wood. Lily cried out, "Help!" Max reached the stairs, barking fiercely, his voice strong and commanding. His scarred ear flicked as he pushed upward, his body straining against the flame's heat. Emily's heart pounded as hope and terror collided. Max had become more than a stray. He was fighting for them. Max reached Lily, barking as she clung to the railing. Her small hands shook as she whispered, "Don't leave me." He pressed against her, nudging with his head, guiding her down step by step. The flames snapped at their heels, smoke swirling thick and choking. Emily cried from below, "Come on, Lily, you can do it." Mark stood ready with a wet cloth, his face pale with fear. Max barked again, his body shielding her from falling debris, his scarred ear singed by sparks. Lily stumbled but clung to him, her trust absolute. Step by trembling step, they descended until finally, they reached the bottom. Emily swept Lily into her arms, sobbing with relief. Max staggered, his chest heaving, his fur scorched, but his eyes steady. He had done it. For the first time since betrayal had stolen his world, Max was no longer lost. He was needed, and he had answered. The storm had passed, but the farmhouse yard still smelled of smoke and rain. Emily sat on the porch steps, holding Lily close against her chest, her tears soaking the child's hair. Mark stood nearby, silent, his eyes fixed on Max. The dog lay in the mud, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths, patches of fur singed, his scarred ear raw. Emily whispered through her sobs, "He saved her. He saved us." Lily stirred, lifting her head, her small voice trembling. "He's our hero, Mama." Mark's lips tightened, words caught in his throat as he watched Max struggle to lift his head, his eyes still sharp though his body shook. Emily brushed the child's hair back, her voice steadier now. "We won't let him suffer alone." For the first time Mark's sternness faltered, his gaze softening, though unspoken guilt lingered in his eyes. Emily knelt in the mud beside Max, her trembling hands hovering before finally brushing against his fur. Max flinched, then relaxed, his tired eyes locking on hers. She whispered, "You're safe now, I promise." Lily slid down from the porch, kneeling beside her mother, small hands reaching tentatively toward Max's paw. "Don't be scared, we love you," she said softly. Max whimpered, pressing his paw weakly against hers, his tail twitching faintly. Emily's heart ached at the fragile gesture, the first sign of trust given freely. Behind them, Mark shifted uncomfortably, his stern mask breaking as he murmured, "I was wrong." His voice cracked in the night air, heavy with shame. Emily lifted her head, her eyes meeting his, but no words were needed. The truth was clear. Max had proven what neither cruelty nor abandonment could erase. His loyalty had endured. Hours later, the fire smoldered in ruins, and the farmhouse was dark, except for lantern light. Emily wrapped Max in a blanket, his body trembling, his breaths uneven but steadier than before. She whispered as she cleaned his wounds, "You're home now, and no one will hurt you again." Lily sat beside her, stroking Max's head gently, whispering, "You're my brave friend." Mark carried buckets of water, his shoulders heavy with guilt, but his eyes softer each time he glanced at Max. "He's stronger than any of us," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Emily smiled faintly, brushing Max's scarred ear with care. Max closed his eyes, his body easing for the first time since his abandonment. Around him, the night was no longer filled with rejection, but the sound of voices that carried warmth. For Max, this was not just survival, it was belonging. The dawn broke slowly, golden light spilling over the horizon, washing away the scars of the night. Max stirred, rising shakily to his paws, the blanket slipping off. His legs wavered, but his eyes were bright, his spirit unbroken. Emily rushed to his side, steadying him with her voice. "Easy, boy, take your time." Lily clapped her hands softly, whispering, "You did it, Max, you're strong." Mark stood behind them, arms crossed, though no longer in defiance, his voice low. "He belongs here." Emily turned, surprise flickering across her face before soft relief filled her eyes. Max glanced between them, ears twitching, tail lifting slightly. For the first time he wagged it, tentative yet real. The farmhouse yard, once filled with rejection, now carried the weight of something different. Acceptance, fragile but growing, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Later that morning, the family gathered around the porch, the world fresh with new light. Max lay at Emily's feet, his body still sore, but his eyes calm, no longer filled with fear. Lily leaned against him, resting her small head on his back, her voice soft. "You're my hero, Max." Emily's gaze lingered on the scar across his ear, her heart heavy with the story it told, yet grateful for the strength it carried. She whispered, "What others threw away, we'll treasure." Mark sat nearby, silent but no longer stern, his hand resting loosely on Max's back. Max closed his eyes, his tail thumping gently against the porch wood, a rhythm of peace. For the first time, he felt not like a burden, but like family. The wounds of the past remained, but the promise of healing had begun, and Max had finally found where he belonged. The days after the fire brought quiet healing, the farmhouse scarred but still standing. Emily worked tirelessly to mend what was lost, her hands steady, her heart grateful. Max lay nearby, no longer trembling, his eyes following her every move. Lily laughed as she played near the barn, her voice carrying joy that once seemed impossible. Mark repaired broken beams, his movements slower, more thoughtful, his gaze soft when it lingered on Max. At night, the stars filled the sky, and Emily whispered to Max, "You've given us more than we could ever give you." He lifted his head, ears twitching, as if he understood. The world that had once abandoned him had been replaced by a place that chose him, scars and all. For Max, belonging was no longer a dream, but a living truth. On a bright morning, Max ran through the open fields, his body strong again, the wind whipping through his fur. Lily chased after him, giggling, her arms stretched wide, as though she too might fly. Emily watched from the porch, her smile soft, her eyes misted with quiet pride. Mark leaned against the railing, shaking his head with a faint grin. "Didn't think I'd ever see him like this," he admitted. Emily's voice carried warmth. "He was always meant for more." Max bounded back toward Lily, his tail wagging high, his scar no longer a mark of pain but of survival. Lily hugged his neck, whispering, "You're mine forever." The farmhouse behind them stood not as a reminder of fire, but as proof of endurance. The field stretched wide, filled with light, and for the first time Max felt truly free. Later that afternoon, Emily sat beneath a tall oak tree, Lily nestled against her, Max resting with his head on her lap. Emily stroked his fur gently, her voice a soft murmur. "You're family now, Max. Nothing will take that away." Lily's small hand joined hers, fingers brushing his scarred ear with tenderness. "He's strong because he has us," she said with a smile. Max's tail thumped lazily, his eyes half closed, soaking in the warmth of belonging. Mark approached quietly, carrying a bowl of water, his steps slow but intentional. He set it down with care, muttering, "Heroes deserve more than scraps." Emily met his gaze, her smile carrying forgiveness and gratitude. Max opened his eyes, lifting his head briefly, before sinking back into rest, the shadows of the past fading further with each passing moment. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Max sat at the crest of the hill behind the farmhouse, the wind ruffling his fur. Emily, Lily, and Mark stood behind him, their figures outlined against the glowing sky. Emily rested her hand on Lily's shoulder, her voice filled with wonder. "Look at him. He's finally home." Lily clasped Emily's hand, whispering, "He's not scared anymore." Mark crossed his arms, his voice quieter than usual. "He's stronger than any of us knew." Max lifted his head high, his scar catching the light, no longer a symbol of abandonment, but of resilience. The horizon stretched endlessly before him, painted in fiery orange and gold. In that moment, he was not just a dog who survived. He was a soul reborn, standing tall where the world once tried to break him. Night fell, and the farmhouse lights glowed warmly against the dark. Inside, Max lay curled at the foot of Lily's bed, his body finally at peace. Lily whispered sleepily, "Good night, Max, I love you." He lifted his head, eyes soft before settling again, his tail giving one last gentle wag. Emily peeked in, her eyes misted as she watched the two, her heart overflowing. Mark stood behind her, his arm brushing hers, his voice low. "He belongs here, Emily, with us." She nodded, whispering back, "Yes, he always did." The house was quiet, safe, filled with the hum of life continuing. Max's breathing steadied, his body warm, no longer trembling in fear. The world outside was vast and cruel, but here, within these walls, he had found the one thing he had always longed for, a home filled with love.